Is there such a thing as having too high of a dividend yield in your portfolio? It almost seems like a foolish question to ask, because why wouldn't you want a higher dividend yield? A higher dividend yield means more income today, and potentially an earlier retirement. Well, in my opinion, you can have too much yield. Higher yields aren't always sustainable, and they can create a tax drag on your portfolio. Take the popular YieldMax ETFs, for example. They lure investors with the promise of extremely high dividend yields, sometimes upwards of 100%. If we take a closer look at Misty, one of YieldMax's more popular offerings, it currently boasts a distribution rate of 81.71%. But if we examine its recent distribution history, we can see that the monthly dividend has varied wildly, from a low of $1.33 earlier this month to a high of $4.42 just this past November. So while the 81% yield sounds appealing, the lack of consistency in the monthly payouts is far less desirable. Misty, of course, generates income by selling options against MicroStrategy stock. If we look at the year-to-date return for MicroStrategy, it is up 9.52%. Meanwhile, Misty has a return of minus 19.31%, excluding dividends. Now, if we include dividends and look at the total return year-to-date, Misty doesn't look as bad, showing a gain of 8.02%, much closer to MicroStrategy's 9.52% return. But this assumes you're reinvesting all of Misty's dividend income back into the ETF. In the long run, the goal is often to live off this dividend income, which begs the question, once you switch from reinvesting dividends to living off of them, could ETFs like Misty end up dragging your portfolio down? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I, for one, would prefer more stability and consistency in my dividend portfolio. I also want to see long-term capital appreciation, outside of just reinvested dividends. Which brings us back to the original question, how much dividend yield do you actually need? And to help us answer this question, I built a custom spreadsheet, which you can download for free using a link down below. The spreadsheet takes several inputs to calculate the minimum dividend yield you should aim for to reach your financial goals. Let me walk you through how it works. The green-colored cells are the input parameters that you can play around with, and they start with your current balance. This is the amount of capital you currently have invested in the stock market. I'm going to leave this as $0 and assume we are just starting our journey. The second parameter is the number of years we have left before retirement. You can either enter the number of years before you reach full retirement age, or conversely, in how many years you would like to retire. I'll set this to 25 years. The third input is your annual contribution, and here you type in how much money you expect to add to your portfolio in the upcoming year. I'll set this to $500 per month or $6,000 per year. The fourth parameter is the annual contribution increase. If you think that you can progressively add more money to your portfolio each year, you can enter the estimated percentage increase that you believe you will be able to reach. I'll set the increase to 3% per year, or about the standard merit increase. The fifth input is the total return you expect your portfolio to deliver in the long term. The stock market, on average, grows by about 10% per year. If you plan on being invested for a very long time, you can leave this at the original 10%, or you can lower it to be conservative, or increase it if you're more optimistic. For this example, I'll leave it at the original 10%. The sixth input is the desired annual dividend income you want to have when you retire. In this case, it would be at the end of the time period you entered in the second parameter, the number of years left before retirement. I'll set this to $100,000. The last input you can play around with is the assumed inflation rate. I have it set to 2%. And all this metric really does is show you the value of your desired annual dividend income at the time of retirement in today's dollars. It basically discounts the annual dividend income by the rate of inflation over the duration of your investing journey. So in our example, at the 2% inflation rate, our $100,000 annual dividend income target is equivalent to about $55,000. Another way to think about this is as buying power. $100,000 30 years from today is equivalent to $55,000 in buying power today. After entering your values, click the blue Calculate Optimal Yield button. The spreadsheet will start testing different yields, starting at 0.1% and increasing by 0.1% increments, until the final year's dividend income exceeds your target. Then it fine-tunes the result to 2 decimal places. In our example, the result is a required dividend yield of 8.18%. The spreadsheet assumes the dividend growth rate is the difference between total return and dividend yield. So here, with a 10% return and an 8.18% yield, your dividend growth rate is 1.82%. The yellow cells show you several other helpful outputs, starting with the annual dividend income in the final year in cell C14. Just below that, you can see the final market value of your portfolio. Skipping down to cell C22, you can see the total amount of money you would have invested into this portfolio during this 30-year journey. Below that, you have the amount of capital gains and our total return. Skipping down to cell C26, you can see the total dividends you would have received, which, as you can see, the bulk of our capital gains are a direct result of reinvesting dividends in this example. And the final value shown is your yield on cost in the final year. The point of this spreadsheet is to allow you to play around with the input parameters to figure out if your goals are realistic and to give you an idea of what type of dividend yield may be ideal for you. Please keep in mind that this spreadsheet models a steady exponential growth, whereas the stock market is volatile with a mix of up and down years, so your actual journey will not be as linear. Over to the right, you can see the dividend income for each of the years in your journey. The spreadsheet is able to test a maximum of 50 years and a maximum dividend yield equal to your total return assumption. Let's say that you aren't happy with this 8.18% yield assumption, and you'd like to build a portfolio with a lower yield and higher dividend growth. What we can do is change our inputs to see what impact they have on the minimum target dividend yield. Let's start by changing the time frame. Let's say we can delay retirement for 5 additional years. So I'll change cell C5 from 30 to 35. And then I can hit the Calculate Optimal Yield button again to have the spreadsheet crunch the data once more. I'll fast forward to the final outcome here, which is a target dividend yield of 4.86%. That's quite a large decrease for just a 5-year longer investing journey. We can also see that the final market value of our portfolio has increased quite a bit, now exceeding $2 million. But let's see if we can duplicate the same outcome in our original 30-year test window by contributing more money to our portfolio and increasing our contributions at a higher rate. I'll change the number of years back down to the original 30, and I'll increase our monthly contribution to $750 per month from the previous $500. This now gives us an annual contribution of $9,000. Let's run the test again, and if we don't see a favorable result, we can try increasing our annual contribution. Again, I'm going to just fast forward to the outcome, which is a target dividend yield of 5.46%, so slightly higher than the yield we needed with a 35-year time horizon and the lower contribution rate. Let's see if we can cut this yield down by changing our annual contribution increase from 3% to 5%. And let's run the macro again. Changing the contribution increase was more than enough to get us to where we wanted to be. Our target yield is now 4.47%. Which is actually even lower than the 4.86% yield from our 35-year test. Let me run one more example. I'll input my own personal information here to see what my target dividend yield should be. I currently have about $450,000 invested in the market. I have about 20 years left before I can tap into my tax-deferred accounts, so I'll set the time frame to 20 years. I plan to contribute about $30,000 across all of my brokerage accounts this year. I typically try to increase my contribution rate by 5%. Sometimes I actually increase it more, but let's stick with 5% here. I'm going to change my total return assumption to 12%, because that is the rate of return I aim for with my strategies. And I'm going to be a little optimistic here in that I can reach my goal in the long run. I would like to have about $75,000 in annual dividend income by retirement. With my other streams of income, that should be plenty for me to live comfortably. But I'll actually set the desired annual income to $115,000 because I'd like to have the equivalent of $75,000 in dividend income in today's dollars. You can see that cell C20 is showing me the inflation-adjusted dividend income of about $77,000. And let's hit calculate. And my target dividend yield is 1.73% with a 10.27% dividend growth rate. The final market value of my portfolios should be about $6.6 million 20 years from today. My current dividend yield across all of my portfolios is closer to 1.5%, so I may be aiming a little bit too low, and I should probably consider upping my yield a little bit to make sure I can comfortably hit my target. The majority of my invested capital is in tax-deferred or tax-exempt accounts. Therefore, it will be quite easy for me to boost my yield 20 years from today should that need arise. I hope you find this tool valuable. Please keep in mind that these are just estimates based on your inputs and a fixed rate of growth. Your actual results will not look the same. You may end up somewhere close to where this calculator predicts, but the journey will be filled with ups and downs. Again, there's a link down below if you'd like to grab a free copy of this spreadsheet. If you like this type of analysis and you'd like to see more content from me, you can check out my newsletter, Quality at a Fair Price. I share a lot of my research and stock analysis for free in the newsletter. There's also some additional paid benefits, but plenty of free stuff as well. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching and see you next time.